Today is Wednesday, March 18th, and I am starting another reading vlog for women in horror. Today I'm going to be reading from Monster, She Wrote, The Lottery Plus One, and Carmen Maria Machado's In the Dream House, and I'm going to take you along with me while I do all of the things. Alright. As with the format of these vlogs in the past, I'm going to start out by reading from Monster, She Wrote, exploring another lady of horror. Here we have Gertrude Barrows Bennett, 1883 to 1948. Back in the day when people's husbands casually died while looking for treasure. Like, Gertrude Barrows Bennett lost her husband 1 year into their marriage because he was lost in a tropical storm, legitimately searching for buried treasure. It's tragic, but also like, what a job. My job is looking for buried treasure. Okay, so what did I learn? So Bennett was apparently a peer of H.P. Lovecraft, and one of the scholars at the forefront of this initially credited Lovecraft as inventing the genre of dark fantasy, and then after doing some more research, actually feels that it was Gertrude Barrows Bennett who influenced Lovecraft. And when Bennett had published this one short story, Lovecraft, under a pen name, wrote this fan letter to her just gushing about the story. And then it seems like her writing influenced Lovecraft and his peers, not the other way around. She was very isolated and writing in this genre separate from Lovecraft and like the writers that he kept in his little circle of writer friends. And she was never a part of it, but they were probably influenced by her. H.P. Lovecraft is probably a name that most bookish humans know, they recognize, and especially if you read horror literature, it is a name that you're familiar with. But that Gertrude Barrows Bennett is probably the underlying inspiration for a lot of Lovecraft's work, is like super fascinating and super important to know. It's a real shame that a lot of these women's works have been lost, and like the way that they get them back is through like deep archive digging. Looking through people's personal collections that have been donated to libraries, like in ways that a lot of the male horror authors or early speculative fiction, sci-fi, fantasy authors were kept alive through like anthologizing and republishing their short stories that were passed out to all these pulp magazines. These women have disappeared, and like they really have no information on her background. What they have gathered from her life, it's very bare bones, and it's like literary critics pulling small details together that gives us information about Bennett. And now I'm going to move on to one of the stories in Shirley Jackson's The Lottery and Other Stories. I have again been plucking away at this. I'm not sure if I've captured any of this in the vlogs. I don't think so. Trial by Combat is a weird little story. Not at all horrific. Again, a lot of these stories haven't been horrific, just sort of puzzling and mundane, very much focused on the lives of women. A lot of young women living alone in boarding house situations, and this was no different. It was about a young woman named Emily who has noticed small things disappearing from her room, and her confrontation with that human, or lack thereof. And it's just very quiet and domestic and a little bit odd. I really don't know what to do with it. So we're gonna leave that there. I'm reading 2 Carmen Maria Machado books. I have a collection of short stories here. And so I think I might look at 8 Bites, which is the next short story in this collection, before moving on to In the Dream House, which is her memoir. Like, this collection has been a weird mix of genre, of queerness, of sexual desire, critique of society and how women are treated in society, and it's all just very weird. Weird is the perfect word. I'm gonna see what 8 Bites is about, and I will let you know my thoughts. 8 Bites is about a plus-sized woman who is the last of 4 sisters to get bariatric surgery, and the supernatural consequences of that, shall we say. It is so dark. It was actually really hard to read. I don't want to spoil it because I think it's one of the better stories in this collection, but it's so dark. Oh my gosh. That being said, I'm going to move on to In the Dream House. I'm on page 48. Moving on to the little vignette in Dream House as road trip everywhere. All right. Good evening. It has gotten dark both in the Dream House and in real life. It is 4:45. And it's kind of an overcast day. So I think I'm gonna stop for the day, or at least for a little while I eat my dinner. I made myself a sandwich and I have some carrot sticks. And I'm gonna watch something trashy on Netflix. I don't know what yet. Good morning. Today is Thursday. Yes, Thursday, March 19th. Today I'm going to be starting with the Monster She Wrote, Woman in Horror History. And who are we learning about today? It is Avril Worrell, 1893 to 1969. Avril Worrell was apparently a woman who, like many women writers at the time, lived this double existence. She worked as a stenographer and a secretary for the US Department of Treasury, and then would come home at night and write her own stories. She wrote at least 24 stories between 1926 and 1954, although she's believed to be like more prolific than that, and a lot of these works have been lost to time. There are 2 tales here that I think would be super cool to check out. The first one is about a female vampire. It's called The Canal, and it's sort of riffing off Carmilla, the vampire novella, in that this is about a female vampire who is seductive and is preying on fishermen on the riverbank at night. And then there's another tale here that they talk about. It's called Lenora. It's about a 16-year-old who's meeting this stranger by the light of the full moon, and they can only meet on the light of the full moon, and there's apparently a fun twist. Apparently she also wrote song lyrics, and she played the violin, and she was a very talented painter. So she just sounds like this really epic, artistic human. Today is Friday, March 20th. Today is my 10-year anniversary with my partner. And we're not exactly doing anything exciting to celebrate it because of the situation, but it's exciting nonetheless. This morning, I'm going to chat to you a little bit about the book I finished last night, which is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a memoir dealing with same-sex domestic violence. There's this idea that 2 women together is like a lesbian utopia, that you would leave behind all of the problems that come from being in a relationship with a man who has been socialized to be stereotypically masculine, violent, hashtag no tall men. Not tall men, but it looks like no tall men. But the reality is that queer people are not born and raised in a vacuum. Queer people grow up in abusive situations, and abuse is often cyclical, and like you reproduce the relationships that you see. There's a lot of talk about gaslighting in here. There's a lot of references to the film Gaslight and like the weird story of Gaslight. So I guess Gaslight, the first film was made in 1940. Another major studio bought the rights to that film, burned all of the film in an attempt to eradicate that original version of the film ever existed, and in 1944 remade the same film with Ingrid Bergman. Like, their plan wasn't successful. People still remember the first Gaslighting. Like, the story behind the second production of Gaslighting is fascinating. There's just all sort of interesting bits and pieces that come together in these little vignettes. And one of the things that happens later on is a choose your own adventure. I'm going to read a little bit of this to you now, because I think this sort of exemplifies the topic and then also the playing with form of memoir. So this is page 162, Dream House as Choose Your Own Adventure. You wake up and the air is milky and bright. The room glows with a kind of effervescent contentment, despite the boxes and clothes and dishes. You think to yourself, this is the kind of morning you could get used to. When you turn over, she is staring at you. The luminous innocence of the light curdles in your stomach. You don't remember ever going from awake to afraid so quickly. You were moving all night, she says. Your arms and elbows touched me. You kept me awake. If you apologize profusely, go to page 163. If you tell her to wake you up next time your elbows touch her in your sleep, go to page 164. If you tell her to calm down, go to page 166. So let's go to page 166. Are you kidding? You'd never do this. Don't try and convince any of these people that you'd stand up for yourself for 1 second. Get out of here. And go to page 177. So basically you're flipping back and forth between page 162 and 177. And page 177 says, that's not how it happened, but okay, we can pretend. I'll give it to you just this once. And then you sort of get out of this cycle. And so it's interesting that the nature of these pages, depending on how you choose, some will send you back to this first page of you wake up, and some will just give you a flat out, like, no, like, that's flat out never what you would do, go to this page. It builds in the cycle of living with an abusive partner into this choose your own adventure. It is a fascinating memoir. And I can see how, because this is not fiction, but it shows up on lists of horror fiction, I can see how the format, the playing with form, has led people to include it with actual fiction, because it has this dreamlike quality to it. You are in the, I guess, experience of, like, it very easily puts you in the space of herself at this time in this relationship, and this fragmented storytelling feeling to it, right? Like, you see her tell herself stories to get through and to repair and to make excuses and to make things seem okay in her brain to continue on with the relationship. And it is horrifying to bear witness to this. If you are interested in memoir, if you are interested in memoir that pushes formal innovation, if you are interested in queer authors, queer relationships, and you are mentally able to engage with that type of material, I would highly recommend In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I don't think I can really look at this, like, I can't compare this to Shirley Jackson or to White is for Witching that I read for this project, but I can see why this was compared to it, because I think in many ways she is drawing on those horror tropes and, like, well-known horror narratives of the domestic to talk about her own lived experience. So while I can't compare it, I don't think it's fair to compare it because this is her life, this isn't fiction. I can see why this shows up on those horror lists. This was a tough read, and I feel like it's darker than anything I'm going to read while I explore women's horror fiction, because this is fucking real. This is her real story. So that brings me to the end of this reading vlog. Let me know your thoughts on In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado in the comments down below. Thank you to my patrons who make videos like this and long form projects like the most possible. I'm actually going to shift gears for something a little bit lighter and do a Prisoner of Azkaban reading vlog now. Happy children's literature. Thank you, patrons, for making long form series possible. Stay safe, happy reading, and I will see you soon. Bye.